So recall from microeconomics that the price elasticity of demand, which sometimes we just call the demand elasticity, is the percentage change in demand divided by the percent change in price. And given that we have a downward sloping demand curve, that number is always negative, and we often just refer to the elasticity as the absolute value. And so we put a little negative in front of that, just in terms of keeping it as a positive number. And remember, when demand is elastic, then marginal revenue is always positive. So if the demand elasticity is greater than 1, then dropping the price will increase revenue. And then when it gets below 1, marginal revenue becomes negative. So why do we care about this? Well, this is going to be important because it relates to profits, right? And so a firm's markup is how much they charge above their price. And if a firm is facing a really elastic demand, which means that if they change their price a little bit, quantity changes by a lot, then a firm's markup is going to be smaller. Their profits are going to be lower. Whereas if a firm faces really inelastic demand, then uh, their profits are going to be higher because their markup is higher. And so when we think about firms facing elastic versus inelastic demand, elastic demand will include, firms that face a lot of competition, firms that produce goods or services that have a lot of substitutes so that consumers can buy something else. Whereas firms with inelastic demand will have, an innovative product, or they'll have a monopoly or a near monopoly on a product or service. And there just won't be that many substitutes for consumers to purchase. So this is going to be important because it's going to determine, how profitable firms are and how expensive their goods and services are. So when we think about market power really just is uh, means how much can firms charge above their costs, right? And competition policy is going to be very important. So things like the Federal Trade Commission and the Justice Department that look at whether or not firms should be allowed to merge, whether firms have too much market power and should be broken up, um, is very important because it will keep uh, prices lower for consumers if there's more competition within a particular industry, because there will be more substitutes. So as an example, AT&T wanted to merge with T-Mobile a few years ago, and the government basically said, no, you can't do that because we think you'll have too much market power. The other sort of two remaining firms in the market will have too much market power, prices will go up, and we think this will be a bad thing for customers. One sort of extreme example of market power is a monopoly, right? So a monopoly is a firm that is the only seller of a good or service. And monopolists are allowed to enjoy monopoly rents, meaning that they can charge much higher customers than a firm that faces a lot of competition. And it's a form of market failure because there's a deadweight loss. There are going to be people that we're willing to pay more than marginal cost, but that don't get to buy the product because the firm has decided to charge a higher price in order to increase their profits. There are things known as natural monopolies that require firms to usually invest large amounts, and so it doesn't make sense for another firm to enter the market. So, water companies are usually natural monopolies, cable companies, kind of a natural monopoly. And so instead of encouraging competition in these industries, often they will end up either being publicly owned, or their prices or profits will be controlled directly by regulation. So, but what firms want to do is try to gain market power, because if they can gain market power, then they can increase their profits. And so they can innovate, right? They can get new products and services. Sometimes they can patent those products or services or protect them with copyright law. Or they can advertise and try to increase brand loyalty, because that's another way of shifting a firm's demand curve. If you think about soda, Coke versus Pepsi, light beer, Bud Light versus Coors Light, basically the same products, but they advertise a lot in order to try to differentiate their product and gain some market power so that they can charge above their costs and earn a positive economic profit.